It was quite an ordeal for Joe when to finally return home and be able to game in peace. But just as he sat on the sofa and launched the game dungeon, Li Xuan rushed home. Your door was kicked down by a woman who claimed to be your sister. Her name is Li Weiyang. Zhou Wen immediately made things clear, afraid that Li Xuan would blame him for damaging his villa. However, Li Xuan didn't heed that at all. In excitement, he asked Zhou Wen in a mysterious manner, "Are you interested in visiting the dimensional zone I previously mentioned? Are you talking about the dimensional zone that produces organ-type companion beasts?" Zhou Wen asked. Bingo. Are you interested? But we haven't matriculated. Can we enter now? Zhou Wen looked at Li Xuan suspiciously. The average person obviously can't, but I'm no average person, Li Xuan said as he languidly slapped his chest. Alright, let's head over. Zhou Wen was quite intrigued, but it wasn't that he wanted to enter a dimensional zone. Instead, he wanted to know if the dimensional zone could be installed on his phone just like Guide Ancient City. Bro, can you show me some excitement? I really can't feel a sense of achievement with that face of yours, Li Xuan said gloomily. Wow. You're awesome. Zhou Wen cried out in a very perfunctory manner as he continued gaming on his phone without looking up. Forget it. Li Xuan became even more depressed. However, he cheered up almost immediately. Pulling Zhou Wen out, he said, "Pal, I'll be broadening your horizon today." When they arrived in the yard, Zhou Wen saw a white tiger sprawled outside the villa. It was even bigger and muscular than an ox. Legendary jade-eyed white tiger. How cool is that? I incubated it just today. It was such a harrowing experience, Li Xuan bragged as his saliva splattered about. With such flaunting, you have no plans on acting any further, right? Zhou Wen asked curiously. Li Xuan's face sank. In the past, I wished that things wouldn't turn nasty among the family, so I didn't compete with him. Since he doesn't even want to spare my life, there's no need for me to stand on ceremony with him. From now on, I'll become the Li family's genius, Li Xuan. What should be mine will be mine, nothing less. Zhou Wen gave Li Xuan the thumbs up. Indeed, a genius like Li Xuan didn't deserve to be hidden. However, he was curious. Li Xuan cultivated in the invincible Kannate divine art, so was he to stay a virgin his entire life if he continued cultivating in it? Let's not touch on such matters. Come on up. Let's go a joyride. This jade-eyed white tiger is extraordinary. If I use enough resources on it, it has a chance of advancing to an epic king of white tigers. That would make it truly terrifying, Li Xuan said as he jumped onto its back. Zhou Wen knew that certain companion beasts could evolve, but they were in the minority. Furthermore, evolution required special dimensional materials and very strict criteria. Currently, the League was doing research in this respect. There were less than 400 on the official list of evolvable companion beasts. The rest were still being studied. Riding on a companion beast didn't feel good in any way. The trembling was intense due to the lack of a suspension. Zhou Wen would rather ride in a comfortable sedan car. However, Li Xuan was thrilled. He dashed down the road riding the jade-eyed white tiger, whistling and waving to beauties he passed on the street. This fellow's foppish character sure doesn't appear to be an act. Zhou Wen suddenly thought of a problem. He whispered into the legendary stage's ear, "Li Xuan, what are the criteria needed to incubate a legendary companion egg for those at the mortal stage?" Li Xuan said, "You wish to incubate that skeleton general, right? I'm warning you not to mess around. Don't try it just because it seems it's easy for me to incubate one. Let me tell you seriously that people with such thoughts mostly end up either crippled or dead." After a pause, Li Xuan said smugly, "To incubate a companion egg, the most important criteria is to have sufficient primordial energy. A typical legendary companion egg needs more than 10 primordial energy to incubate it. The typical human at the mortal stage doesn't have that much primordial energy. After being sucked dry of their primordial energy, one's vitality and essence would be drawn in place of primordial energy. When that happens, it's either death or disability. The reason I can incubate a legendary companion egg is because my invincible Kannate divine art has cultivated to 9 points of primordial energy. Furthermore, I have plenty of vitality and essence that I'm not afraid of being drained. Even so, I had to specially select legendary companion eggs that require relatively fewer primordial energy points. Only then can I succeed and survive. It's almost impossible for others to succeed unless you aren't afraid of death. Give up, man. I'm unique, Li Xuan added smugly. What Li Xuan had said served as a warning for Zhou Wen. The latter was obviously afraid of death, but the blood-colored avatar in-game wasn't. Perhaps he could use the blood-colored avatar to incubate a legendary companion beast. Unfortunately, I have no way of taking the companion egg into the game. To make an attempt, I can only wait until a companion egg drops in-game. With this in mind, he was quite tempted. The phone's camera feature is able to download dimensional zones. I wonder if it can be used on companion eggs. When Zhou Wen thought of this, he took out the companion egg and phone from his pocket. He was sitting behind Li Xuan and, with him in the way, no one else could see what he was doing. Zhou Wen then attempted to open the mysterious phone's camera function and aimed it at the skeleton general companion egg. Beep. To Zhou Wen's surprise, the camera function was usable. When the camera was pointed at the skeleton general companion egg, a green box appeared on the screen, and with a beep, it focused on the companion egg. At the same time, many text and numbers appeared. Skeleton general companion egg, legendary. Life Providence, Oath of City Defense. Strength, 15. Speed, 13. Constitution, 16. Primordial Energy, 18. Primordial Energy Skill, Penetrating Pierce, rank 3. Companion Form, General Bone Armor. Joe Wen looked at the skeleton general's stats in surprise. It wasn't because the stats were surprising, but that no one was able to run tests before a companion egg was incubated, thus making it impossible to know how good a companion beast would be before incubation. With just a snap, the phone could list down detailed numbers. It was amazing. The same companion beast type all had different stats. The higher they were, the better they were naturally. It was especially so with primordial energy skills. The higher the rank, the more valuable the companion beast was. Beep. While Joe Wen was looking at the skeleton general's stats, his phone beeped again. At the same time, a notification popped up on the screen. Skeleton General and Mutated Vigor Ant have a compatibility score of 47%. Fusion has a success rate of 47%. Proceed with fusion? A yes and no option popped up on the screen. Without any hesitation, he chose yes. Then there was a clicking sound, the sound of a camera's shutter. The phone snapped a picture of the Skeleton General, simultaneously making the Skeleton General companion egg in Joe Wen's hand vanish into thin air. Article 42 of 1597. As the phone screen presented the Skeleton General companion egg, Joe Wen's mutated vigor ant appeared beside it. A notification popped up on the screen again. As the mutated vigor ant has already finished incubating, the Skeleton General companion egg will be used as supplementary material. Proceed with fusion? Joe Wen chose yes. Since he was unable to incubate the Skeleton General companion egg and there were chances for him to obtain mutated vigor ants again in the future, there was no harm trying. With Joe Wen making the choice, the Skeleton General companion egg flew towards the mutated vigor ant. After infusing into the mutated vigor ant, the screen immediately turned into a spiraling chaos. Ding. After a while, the game screen finally returned to normal. At the same time, there was a notification sound as the following line appeared: fusion successful. Mortal mutated vigor ant has evolved into mortal mutated skeleton ant. Joe Wen was somewhat depressed when he heard that. The outcome was still a mortal companion beast after fusing with a legendary skeleton general. It felt like a terrible loss. When he carefully studied the skeleton ant after the successful fusion, he saw that its originally red carapace had turned dark red. Furthermore, the carapace's texture had changed. It now seemed like bone that had been dyed red. Even its feelers and claws had the same texture. Furthermore, its claws had turned sharp, covered with razor-like barbed bones. It looked ferocious and terrifying, especially its two front claws. They looked like two strange sickles. Although it had evolved to something rather strong, it was still at the mortal stage. No matter how much it evolved, it had no way of competing with a companion beast at the legendary stage. Tapping on the mutated skeleton ant stats to take a look, Joe Wen was immediately taken aback. Compared to the mutated vigor ant, its stats had changed tremendously. Mutated skeleton ant mortal. Strength 10. Speed 9. Constitution 10. Primordial energy 9. Talent skill skeleton pierce rank 10. Companion form bracer. Strength and companion beast has increased to 10. Same for the talent skill. Joe Wen was alarmed. He had never heard of companion beasts having rank 10 talent skills. In fact, Joe Wen always believed that rank 9 was the limit to primordial energy skills. Only when his ashen palm reached rank 10 did he realize that there was such a thing. Joe Wen had the urge to summon the mutated skeleton ant to see what it looked like. After all, it was drawn in a cartoon style in-game. There were bound to be differences in real life. Unfortunately, he was sitting on Li Xuan's jade-eyed white tiger. This wasn't the best time to summon it. Despite his arrogance, Li Xuan put away his companion beast at the entrance to Sunset College. He then walked in with Joe Wen without the pompous attitude. Sunset College was a new college that was established after the dimensional storms. It was very close to the Dragon Gate Grotto, the biggest dimensional zone in Luang to date. To this day, humanity had not finished exploring it in its entirety. It was even said that humans had only managed to explore a very tiny area. Apart from the Dragon Gate Grotto, there were several dimensional zones found inside Sunset College. It could be said that Sunset College took most of the dimensional zone resources in Luang. Due to it being a partially restricted school, the students still had to wear uniforms despite being university students. It was a little like military wear. It was still the holidays, but there were plenty of students on campus. Li Xuan and Joe Wen were stopped by the guards at the door. The guards of Sunset College weren't security guards but real soldiers. In fact, the dimensional zones in Sunset College were guarded by real military troops. Li Xuan took out 2 special passes before being permitted to enter. As Li Xuan led Joe Wen in, he explained, Luang was home to 13 Chinese dynasties. Ancient cities had been built on this piece of land for millennia, but for all kinds of reasons, these ancient cities had been destroyed and lost to the rivers of time. It could be said that the ground that Luang sits on is piled up from multiple ancient cities. Ever since the dimensional storms, many dimensional zones were formed underground. The deeper one goes, the more terrifying the zone becomes. People from Luang are accustomed to calling the underground dimensional zones dungeons. At present, the explored dungeon has 4 levels. There's definitely more, but no human expert can get any lower. This time, an entrance to a new dungeon was discovered at Ancient Inlet, and new dimensional creatures and organ-type companion beasts were found inside. Zhou Wen listened attentively to Li Xuan's explanation. Sunset College was just too huge. After walking for nearly an hour, they finally arrived at Ancient Inlet, which Li Xuan had mentioned. Ancient Inlet was, in fact, a marshland. Rumor was that it was once a river mouth of the ancient Yellow River, which once brought disaster to this area by drowning the ancient cities. Later, the Yellow River moved and stopped flowing over this region. In this former riverbed, a new dimensional zone was discovered. When Zhou Wen looked at a stele inside the marshland, his eyes lit up. The stele stood in the middle of the marsh at a height of over 10 meters tall. There was a sitting Buddha engraved on it with fairies circling him. Amongst the various engraved symbols, Zhou Wen found a tiny palm symbol. It was rather inconspicuous amongst the fairies and Buddha palm symbols, but to Zhou Wen, it was extremely familiar. On the city gates of Guide Ancient City, Zhou Wen had seen a similar symbol. Furthermore, he had focused his mysterious phone on it to download the Guide Ancient City game dungeon. However, this tiny palm symbol was a little different from the one he had seen at Guide Ancient City. The palm in the Guide Ancient City's symbol carried something akin to an onion or garlic. But here, engraved in the middle of the tiny palm symbol, was a blooming lotus flower. I'll try to download this game dungeon now. Zhou Wen took out his phone and turned on the camera before aiming it at the tiny palm symbol. Beep. A green box appeared on the screen as it focused on the tiny palm symbol. After the light beep, the familiar installing word appeared. It really works. Zhou Wen was pleasantly surprised. Imagining that Zhou Wen was snapping photos, Li Xuan said, "This stele looks to be in the style of the Northern Wei dynasty. Back then, Buddhism thrived." Zhou Wen wasn't listening to what Li Xuan had to say. The phone had finished installing as a lotus icon appeared on his phone's home screen. Beneath it were 3 words, Underground Buddha City. Article 43 of 1597. The bottom of the stele was the entrance to the dimensional zone where military troops were standing guard. Li Xuan took out 2 entrance passes before they entered. Going down the blue-tiled stairs beneath the stele, they ventured deep underground. Zhou Wen finally knew why the people of Luang described dimensional zones as dungeons. In an underground space tens of meters deep, a dilapidated ancient city connected as one with the underground world. All sorts of blue-tiled ancient architecture made it appear like a maze. At fixed distances, oil lanterns hung on the blue-tiled walls for lighting purposes. The dim yellow light made the already dark and humid ancient dungeon appear even older. Zhou Wen and Li Xuan were on a street. The buildings that stood on either side were engraved with several symbols related to Buddhism. Even the blue-tiled roofs were engraved with flying fairies. Trading 8 valued strength crystals for 8 valued speed crystals. Grab it if you want it. 1 Buddha Heart Lotus Crystal. Only trading, no selling. The most complete and detailed Buddha City map. With 1 map in hand, Buddha City is your oyster. There were several youths dressed in school uniforms setting up stalls along both sides of the street. Clearly, they were seniors of Sunset College. Zhou Wen had wanted to buy a map but was stopped by Li Xuan. Buddha City was only recently discovered. The students here can only explore the vicinity. What value can their maps have? I have here the latest map released by the military. It's much more useful than theirs. Let's head over to the Lotus Pond to try our luck. Let's see if we can find the Buddha Heart Lotus, Li Xuan said as he walked with a map in hand. What's a Buddha Heart Lotus? Zhou Wen asked. It's a kind of plant-type dimensional creature. Didn't I mention that organ-type companion beasts were found here? Buddha Heart Lotus is one of them. Buddha Heart Lotus in companion beast form is the heart, Li Xuan explained. Li Xuan held the map and navigated the dark dungeon with Zhou Wen in tow. Perhaps a result of the dimensional creatures having been wiped clean, they didn't encounter a single one. After walking for nearly an hour, the scene before them opened up. They saw a large swath of green lotus leaves appear in their sights. They were as green as jadeite and they shimmered with a green glow. This huge underground lotus pond was several acres in size. The glimmering green light dyed the entire underground world with a green hue, and at spots relatively far from the bank, one could see huge white lotus flowers blooming. Is that the Buddha Heart Lotus? Zhou Wen stared at the huge white lotus and asked. That's right. That's the Buddha Heart Lotus, a plant-type dimensional creature. However, those Buddha Heart Lotuses are too far from the bank. Unless one can fly, there's no way of getting near them, Li Xuan said. Can't you swim over? Zhou Wen looked at the water in the pond. It was a transparent green and resembled crystals. Definitely not. The water here can even melt steel beams. Humans will be reduced to nothing instantly, Li Xuan hurriedly said. If that's the case, what's the point of coming? Zhou Wen frowned slightly. That's why I said we are trying our luck. If a Buddha Heart Lotus happens to bloom near the bank, we have a chance. Li Xuan rubbed his nose and said, but it seems we aren't having much luck. There isn't a Buddha Heart Lotus blooming by the bank. Just as he said that, they heard galloping sounds coming from behind them. They turned their heads and saw a white horse bolt over with a cold-eyed man sitting on it. The white horse was extremely fast, allowing him to arrive in front of the lotus pond almost instantaneously. However, the man had no intention of reining his horse in, and it didn't drop in speed at all. It rushed straight into the lotus pond. In the next second, Zhou Wen was astonished to find a pair of snow-white wings grow out from the white horse's sides. It leapt into the air and flew above the lotus pond. White-winged flying horse at the mortal stage. A very rare companion beast. That's presently the only one in Sunset College. Its owner is Sunset College's sophomore, Luo Xuan. He's been called one of the four most handsome hunks of Sunset College. I don't like him, he's very arrogant, Li Xuan said as he looked at the white-winged flying horse in envy. His jade-eyed white tiger was far faster than the white-winged flying horse, but it couldn't fly. Naturally, he wasn't able to ride on a white horse and leap across the lotus pond as coolly as Luo Xuan. Luo Xuan rode on his white horse and approached a Buddha heart lotus. When he was about 10 meters away from it, he suddenly saw the petals of a Buddha heart lotus close up on itself, turning into an oval. When the petals suddenly spread open, a green lotus seed was shot out, seemingly blasting Luo Xuan with a cannonball. With a stoic expression, a flash appeared at Luo Xuan's waist, having the green lotus seed. Only then did others notice a sword in his hand. What a fast move. Zhou Wen was somewhat astonished. The Luo family are swordsmen. The Azure Star Sword Anthology is a rather famous sword art. It's not surprising that he's fast with his sword, Li Xuan said, feeling sour grapes. It wasn't that he was jealous of Luo Xuan's sword techniques. It was just that the white-winged flying horse drew too much attention. Although it was at the mortal stage, it was cooler than his jade-eyed white tiger. Zhou Wen was envious as well. Although the mutated skeleton ant was strong, it had a frightening look. In terms of looks, the white-winged flying horse was on a completely different level. Of course, Zhou Wen didn't care about looks. It was simply that the white-winged flying horse's ability of flight made it extremely useful. The white-winged flying horse swept across the white lotus pond as Luo Xuan swept his sword, slicing off the huge white Buddha heart lotuses. Li Xuan and Zhou Wen could only watch in envy as the Buddha heart lotuses were harvested by Luo Xuan. If I had known, I would have tried to obtain a companion beast that can fly, Li Xuan said through gritted teeth. Forget it. Let's head elsewhere to take a look. There should be other dimensional creatures apart from Buddha heart lotuses, right? Zhou Wen asked. The area ahead has dimensional creatures, but it's a little odd there. When the military explored the area, many people died for no reason. It wasn't an exception even with legendary experts. It has already been labeled a restricted zone. Ordinary students cannot approach the area, Li Xuan said as he looked at his map. Intrigued, Zhou Wen asked Li Xuan, how did those people die? If the cause of death was known, it wouldn't be called odd. They just died while walking. No dimensional creature was sighted, nor were there any wounds. Even when the corpses were taken back for an autopsy, it was discovered that their organs had failed and they had shriveled terribly, Li Xuan said. Other than these two places, is there nowhere else in Buddha City with dimensional creatures? Zhou Wen frowned slightly. There's definitely more in the deeper areas of Buddha City. However, even the military hasn't explored the area, so how would the typical student dare to venture in? It would only be courting death. We can't risk our lives for adventure, right? After a pause, Li Xuan added, in fact, the military has offered a reward. If anyone can crack the mystery of the deaths, the military will reward them with a legendary companion egg. Furthermore, they will be awarded perpetual rights to entering Buddha City. Article 44 of 1597. Zhou Wen had wanted to say something when he heard a splash. It was as though a bomb had exploded in the water. The duo turned their heads and saw a wave rise up from the lotus pond like an erupting undersea volcano. Amidst the wave, a gigantic lotus flower with a diameter exceeded 10 meters emerged. The lotus flower was different from the normal Buddha heart lotus. Ordinary Buddha heart lotus had petals that were pure white, but this Buddha heart lotus had blood vessel-like patterns on their white petals. The patterns were faint, outlining a sitting Buddha's silhouette. It appeared as though a blood-colored Buddha was sitting on each petal. Luo Xuan rode on his white-winged flying horse as he dodged the splashes in midair, but some still managed to splatter onto his steed. The white-winged flying horse neighed in pain as its snow-white hide began corroding away, turning into a bloody, gaping hole. It looked extremely terrifying. Luo Xuan wore an ugly expression as he struggled to steer the white-winged flying horse towards the bank. If they were to fall into the water, they were doomed. Real life wasn't a game. Be it a human or a companion beast, death meant death. There were no second chances. It wasn't like Zhou Wen's game, which could be repeated after dying. Luo Xuan wished to escape, but the strange Buddha heart lotus had no intention of sparing him. It shot out a lotus seed the size of a basketball that tore through the sky and headed for the white-winged flying horse and Luo Xuan. Typically, lotus seeds shot out by Buddha heart lotuses were green in color, but this lotus seed was like crystal blood. It appeared instantly in front of Luo Xuan. The white-winged flying horse could no longer dodge in time. Luo Xuan drew his sword and cleaved, sending a beam that sliced through the blood-colored lotus seed. However, before his sword could fully slice through the blood-colored lotus seed, his expression changed. Almost instantly, Luo Xuan retracted his sword as he tapped his toes on the white-winged flying horse's back, jumping nearly 3 meters back like a hawk. Bang! At the same time, the blood-colored lotus seed exploded, turning into bloody rain that enveloped the white-winged flying horse. Following that, Zhou Wen and Li Xuan saw a horrifying scene. The blood landed on the white-winged flying horse like red-hot metal hitting snow. It instantly melted away the white-winged flying horse's flesh. In just seconds, the white-winged flying horse's flesh was completely gone, revealing its white bones. All it could do was let out a tragic neigh before plummeting into the lotus pond. There was zero hope for it. Little White, Luo Xuan yelled out in anger and sadness, but to no avail. He was still in danger. He was at least 500 meters away from the bank. With the white-winged flying horse dead, he had no means of flying. The lotus pond was no different from the rivers of hell. Zhou Wen and Li Xuan wanted to help, but they were helpless. They didn't have any companion beasts capable of flight, nor did they have invulnerable bodies. All they could do was stand at the side and watch, unable to do a thing. As the duo believed that Luo Xuan was doomed, they saw him tap a toe on a lotus leaf, soaring back up as though he was weightless as he stepped towards the next leaf. Hey, this pretty boy has quite some skills. He even has a primordial energy skill that imbues alacrity, Li Xuan exclaimed. When Zhou Wen saw Luo Xuan leap up from the lotus leaf, he was delighted to see the frail lotus leaf tremble slightly instead of being crushed by him. In the dimensional zones in Sunset College, are there places that drop primordial energy skill that imbues alacrity? Zhou Wen asked Li Xuan. Obviously. The most famous one is Dragon Gate Grotto. Zhou Wen began planning to visit Dragon Gate Grotto when he had the chance. If he could download the game dungeon at Dragon Gate Grotto, he could grind for one without any worries. Such a primordial energy skill would be extremely useful. Even if he was no match for his enemies, he could always use it to escape. Boom. Boom. Luo Xuan used the lotus leaves to leap into the sky, but before he got far, 2 salvos were heard. More than 10 blood-colored lotus seeds enveloped the area, sealing off all of Luo Xuan's exits, leaving no room for him to dodge. Although he still had half a sword left, it was useless against the blood-colored lotus seeds. After slicing them apart, their explosive might would only grow stronger. Gritting his teeth, the clothes on Luo Xuan tore apart, revealing a blue ox tattoo. The next second, it tore out of his body, taking on the form of a blue ox companion beast. It appeared in front of Luo Xuan and blocked the blood-colored lotus seeds. With the blue ox as a shield, Luo Xuan finally found a chance of survival. At that split second, he rushed out of the lotus seed bombardment. However, his blue ox companion beast had taken the hit. Once the seeds exploded, splattering the blood within them onto it, its flesh and blood began corroding. It then plummeted into the pond with a tragic cry. That pretty boy, Luo Xuan, sure has plenty of expensive stuff up his sleeves. He actually has 2 mortal companion beasts. Unfortunately, it still won't be easy for him to survive. He's just too far from the bank, Li Xuan said with a shake of his head. Zhou Wen ignored Li Xuan as he stared at the lotus pond. The white-winged flying horse and the blue ox had their flesh corroded, reducing them to a pile of bones as they fell into the pond. This terrifying scene made Zhou Wen recall his mutated skeleton ant. The lotus pond and the Buddha heart lotus's bloody liquid seemed to be only capable of corroding flesh. Bones weren't corroded, so was it possible for the mutated skeleton ant who was already reduced to bone to survive in the lotus pond? At this thought, Zhou Wen summoned his mutated skeleton ant and commanded it to approach the lotus pond. Then, it extended one of its claw tips into the water. When the mutated skeleton ant flew out of the back of his hand, it seemed to be made out of blood-stained bones. Its body was filled with bone spikes and it was much bigger than before its evolution. It looked like a skeleton tank, much more ferocious and terrifying than in-game. Holy shit. What companion beast is that? By the side, Li Xuan jumped in fright from the appearance of the mutated skeleton ant. Then, he realized that it was Zhou Wen's companion beast. Skeleton ant, Zhou Wen answered without much thought as he made the skeleton ant extend one claw into the lotus pond. What are you doing? Li Xuan jumped in fright. Soon, Li Xuan realized that the skeleton ant was completely fine despite extending its claw into the water. It hadn't been corroded by the lotus pond's water. Only then did Zhou Wen confirm that his theory was right. The mutated skeleton ant, which was all bone, wasn't afraid of the lotus pond's water. With a command from him, the mutated skeleton ant slowly entered the lotus pond. Nothing happened despite its body being soaked in the water. Clearly, the pond water had zero effect on it. Zhou Wen was originally worried that the mutated skeleton ant couldn't swim, but he was immediately relieved when he saw it paddling its claws on the surface of the water and the lotus leaves like a water spider. It crawled at a rapid speed, in no way different than it was on land. Article 45 of 1597. When Li Xuan saw the mutated skeleton ant crawling across the water at a rapid speed, he turned agape. Luo Xuan hopped across the lotus leaves with great speed, but the Buddha heart lotus shot its second round of lotus seed bombardment. He had nowhere to hide. Furthermore, even if he could dodge the second salvo, his primordial energy could hardly support his continuous use of his primordial energy skill with alacrity traits. He would still die if he were to land in the lotus pond. Suddenly, he heard a voice from the bank. Luo Xuan, jump on that ant's back. Luo Xuan had no idea who was speaking, nor could he process it. He tried his best to avoid a large portion of the blood-colored lotus seeds, but there was one he couldn't dodge completely. All he could do was grit his teeth and block it with his sword. Although he knew that this action was meaningless, the blood-colored lotus seed would explode once it struck his incomplete sword, reducing him to a pool of blood. He still chose to do so due to his survival instinct. Before his sword hit the blood-colored lotus seed, Luo Xuan suddenly saw a blood-colored figure flash above him. A huge, ghastly ant had leapt over him, slamming into the lotus seed. The blood-colored lotus seed exploded on the ant's head, splattering it all over with its contents. However, the ferocious-looking ant seemed unfazed by it. It landed on the water surface as it began moving its 6 claws rapidly, turning to crawl towards Luo Xuan. Luo Xuan was alarmed, imagining that the ant was about to attack him. However, upon recalling the voice and how the ant had blocked the seed, he immediately understood what was happening. He exerted strength on the lotus leaf and jumped onto the mutated skeleton ant's back. The mutated skeleton ant crawled swiftly across the water surface, much faster than Luo Xuan's hopping about. By the time the Buddha Heart Lotus produced its third salvo, the ant had already escaped beyond its reach. The mutated skeleton ant rushed onto the bank and stopped in front of Zhou Wen. Luo Xuan jumped off the ant's back. Even if he were dumb, he could tell that the mutated skeleton ant was Zhou Wen's companion beast. The one who had shouted was likely Zhou Wen. "My name is Luo Xuan. I'll definitely repay you for saving my life. May I know your name?" Luo Xuan said. "I'm Zhou Wen. He's Li Xuan. We are fellow schoolmates." "It's nothing, so don't take it to heart," Zhou Wen said casually. "Zhou Wen. I'll remember you." Luo Xuan sized up Zhou Wen's looks before turning around to leave. "That fellow is already in such a pathetic state, but he still wears that cocky look. He pisses me off." Li Xuan couldn't stand Luo Xuan. But moments later, Li Xuan was happy again. He chuckled. "Without the white-winged flying horse, let's see how he can act cool in school in the future." Zhou Wen ignored him as he sized up the gigantic Buddha Heart Lotus in the middle of the lotus pond. He guessed that it was a legendary stage-dimensional creature. "Zhou Wen, this skeleton ant is quite impressive. It seems to be the Buddha Heart Lotus's nemesis. Why don't you send it over and try eliminating that Buddha Heart Lotus? If you succeed, you might even get something good," Li Xuan said as he looked at it. "Forget it. That Buddha Heart Lotus is odd. I only have this companion beast. It's best I don't take risks." Zhou Wen planned on returning to grind the underground Buddha City dungeon. In-game, his companion beast could be revived unlike in real life. There was no need for him to take such huge risks here. "You are good at everything except that you lack the spirit and fervor of a young man. What's there to be afraid of? It's only a companion beast. You can get another one in the future. If you can kill that strange Buddha Heart Lotus now, who knows if a special companion beast will drop. Wouldn't you make a killing that way?" Li Xuan commented in dejection. "I don't like betting." Zhou Wen shook his head as he turned around and headed back. Li Xuan could only helplessly follow Zhou Wen to head back. It wasn't easy for him to get 2 entry passes, and now they were returning without even killing a single dimensional creature after coming to underground Buddha City. "Why don't we visit that bizarre place where everyone dies mysteriously?" Li Xuan suggested as he was unwilling to leave empty-handed. "You have a legendary companion beast to protect you. I don't. Besides, I don't wish to bet my life." Zhou Wen walked off without even turning back. "You have zero spirit of adventure." Li Xuan shrugged before leaving underground Buddha City with Zhou Wen. Li Xuan grumbled the entire way about how timid Zhou Wen was, but the latter completely ignored him. After returning to Li Xuan's place, he went straight to his room and launched the underground Buddha City dungeon. When the blood-colored avatar entered, it looked identical to what Zhou Wen had seen of underground Buddha City. He then used the map from Li Xuan and used it to find the lotus pond in-game. Unlike reality, where the Buddha Heart Lotuses near the bank had been sliced clean by students, leaving only Buddha Heart Lotuses deep inside the lotus pond, the game was filled with Buddha Heart Lotuses everywhere across the pond. However, there wasn't a gargantuan Buddha Heart Lotus. To prevent the blood-colored avatar from dying, Zhou Wen didn't let it enter the lotus pond. He summoned the mutated skeleton ant and got it to rush towards a Buddha Heart Lotus situated near the bank. The mutated skeleton ant's sharp front claws sliced through the green lotus seeds that shot out as it didn't hesitate to slice through the Buddha Heart Lotus. "Kills mortal dimensional creature, Buddha Heart Lotus." The system's notification appeared, but nothing dropped. Zhou Wen ordered the mutated skeleton ant to storm into the lotus pond, slicing any Buddha Heart Lotuses he saw. After killing more than 30 Buddha Heart Lotuses, a dimensional crystal finally dropped. However, Zhou Wen realized that it was a constitution crystal with a value of 2. All it could be used for was replenish some of his expended primordial energy. While Zhou Wen was mindlessly killing Buddha Heart Lotuses, the news of the gargantuan Buddha Heart Lotus's appearance had spread across Sunset College. Many students who hadn't left campus during the school break rushed to the lotus pond when they heard. There was no lack of powerful legendary stage students. Everyone wanted to slay the gargantuan Buddha Heart Lotus. When a legendary stage student released a legendary golden-eyed condor companion beast in a bid to slay the Buddha Heart Lotus from the air, to everyone's surprise, it was struck down. It nearly fell into the pond and almost all its feathers dropped off. Thankfully, the golden-eyed condor's owner was quick to react and made it return early. However, it barely escaped with its life. To make it receive a full recovery was not easy. Many legendary stage students tried various methods but failed to make much progress. After all, companion beasts capable of flight were relatively rare. And with a place like the Lotus Pond, humans didn't even dare do the deed themselves, relegating it to their companion beasts. Article 46 of 1597.